Anke. Let's start with Anke, boys. There we go. Do we have any flashcards that are due on Anki? I don't know. We're going to find out right now. We do. What is the central argument to make it stick? Learning is an acquired skill, and the most effective learning techniques, according to evidence and science, are often counterintuitive. I mean, that's dead on. Next time we're going to see that flashcard is in 1.1 months. 33 days or so. All right. What did we study yesterday for Make It Stick? What did we learn? Well, I do remember that we started the takeaway section, and we also finished then exploring nuances probably. So the takeaway section, this is kind of just a wrap up of chapter 2. So retrieval practice, pulling things out of the mind, out of memory, is a potent learning skill for anything you need to remember and pull out in the future, whether it's written, language-based, or motor skill, like anything, any form of skill. Any form of skill can be, or any knowledge, anything you need to pull out of memory and retrieve in the future. Retrieval practice is a potent skill in order to build that memory. The more cognitive effort that is required to pull something out of memory from retrieval, the stronger the memory will be reconsolidated, or the stronger the easier it will be to pull that memory out in the future, meaning the memory is better. So the more effort, the better the memory when using retrieval practice. Okay. And spaced repetitions follow that logic. The reason why spaced repetitions, a potential reason why they are more effective than massed repetitions of retrieval practice, is that spaced repetitions, the spacing in between causes some forgetting, and so that leads to more cognitive effort in the retrieval at the intervals. As far as feedback goes, delayed feedback is more effective than immediate feedback. Again, probably because of the spacing effect. We're not exactly sure on the theories or the science behind it. We know that delayed feedback is shown to lead to deeper learning than immediate feedback. And I've begun to actually implement some of that in my own life. I've been experimenting with delayed feedback by when I'm learning a song. I'm trying to memorize a song. I'll play as much as I can from memory, and then that's it. And then, the next time I pick the guitar up, then I'll figure out, all right, what were the lyrics actually? What was that progression actually? But let it sit with an unknown. Was that right or was that wrong? I think that uncertainty, that discomfort is probably what leads to also more learning. All right. So we talked about retrieval practice, spaced repetitions, cognitive effort, feedback. Is there anything else from that takeaway section that I would have been forgetting? That's pretty good. I think we can start to check though. I don't know what that exploring nuances section would be about. I don't know. Remember what we would have read. It would have been I don't know if we would have read it yesterday. Let's just see what we got. So repeated retrieval. Repeated retrieval leads to, I don't even remember reading about this. So the more retrieval practice you do, before I go into that, I'm just going to make sure I get them all, and then I'll recall them all at once. Okay, got that. Those two. Got that. I don't remember what I read about. Okay, yep. Okay. All right. So I would have read in that exploring nuances section, there would have been, okay, the first thing I would have read about yesterday would have been that students and learners who take tests, practice retrieval, will actually spend more time studying and reviewing and learning their weaknesses and improving upon their weaknesses than students and learners who do not use testing and practice retrieval. So the idea, or it's just the idea alone that when weaknesses are revealed to you, consciously or subconsciously, you're going to spend more time improving on those weaknesses. Versus if you don't use retrieval practice, you don't know your weaknesses, you don't think you have weaknesses, you get illusions of knowing. Okay, then we would have read about indirect benefits of having frequent low stakes quizzes throughout a course or a learning, like a subject or a course, yeah. And I said 5 yesterday, but there's actually 6 that I just saw. So that would have been increases attendance, it increases amount of learning and studying on their own, students on their own, studying on their own before class if the quiz is at the beginning of class, more attention during class if the quizzes are at the end of class, less test anxiety because they're doing it more often. The quizzes and tests themselves are not make or break, do or die, they're spread out. Decreased illusions of knowing, and then better instruction from the teacher because they can better tailor what we need to spend more time on, what we can move through faster based on the actual results of the students, what they know, what they've been getting right, what they're getting wrong. And then in that takeaway section, there's one other thing I forgot about, and that was repeated retrieval. So the more times you retrieve something, the easier it becomes to retrieve in the future. Every time you retrieve something, the easier it becomes to the future. So the more times you retrieve it, you're just enhancing memory. You're making this material, this information, this skill, this knowledge more flexible so you can pull it out in novel situations and use it creatively. Yeah, deeper memories, longer lasting memories, more flexible memories, and applications. All right. So now we're caught up on yesterday. It's time to continue reading the takeaway. I'm going to read a few paragraphs, and then I'll be back to recall, and then we'll go from there. All right, I just read a lot. We officially have 2 paragraphs left in chapter 2. Let's recall everything I just read about. So there's a lot. Basically, again, summarizing the end of this chapter. One thing was students don't need to be in a class to practice retrieval. They can practice retrieval on their own. We can practice retrieval through active recall, flashcards, self-testing. It is more effortful, but it leads to more learning. Corrective feedback improves learning by helping students correct misunderstandings. Corrective feedback on testing. Okay. So students actually come to enjoy the practice of low stakes quizzes and the class itself, the more the low stakes quizzes are given. So there's a relationship between the more quizzes, the more they actually enjoy the quizzes, and the more they enjoy the class. All right. What else? That's 3 things. There's definitely more than that. There's a direct relationship between the more tests and quizzes in a class and the final exam grades. So just having one test alone will improve final exam grades by significantly. Having multiple, and like the more tests you have, the better the final grades will be. Okay, so that's corrective feedback. That's like enjoyment of the class via low stakes quizzes. That's the test, number of tests leading to better test or final exam scores. Practicing retrieval on their own. Students practicing retrieval on their own. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm missing one. Right, okay. The only thing I'm missing was short term. So mass practice or cramming. Cramming. The authors basically define cramming as like short burst of rereading and like reviewing. This leads to actually gain in learning in the short term, but it leads to very quick forgetting. Whereas retrieval practice leads to long-term gains, longer-term learning, longer-term memory retention that doesn't fade so quickly. Like, so when you cram, if you take an immediate test, you'll actually get better than if you didn't cram, like, obviously, but that benefit just plummets after, like, that exam. You forget a lot of it very quickly. Versus retrieval practice being much more sustainable long-term memories. Oh, wait, there's 6 things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One other thing was basically practice testing leads to better calibration of your understanding of your own skills. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like the illusion of competence, illusion of knowing thing that comes from fluency of rereading and reviewing, versus if you take quizzes, you better understand what you currently know, you better understand what you currently don't know, you better understand your weaknesses and your strengths, and you better understand your progress in the subject, course, or mastery of the subject. So that's it for that. I guess we're going to finish it out right here. Let's finish out chapter 2. Talk to you guys in a second. There it is, guys. Chapter 2 is I've now finished reading it. So I think we're 29 episodes in. I'm not sure, but we're done with that chapter for reading wise. So this ending chapter is basically like our last 2 paragraphs was like the principal from the beginning of the chapter, right? He was skeptical about bringing in the retrieval practice into his school. He's like, is this just a glorified way of rote memorizing? We don't want that. If so, we want our students to be able to do higher order things, such as evaluating and applying creatively and synthesizing and, asking bigger picture questions. And basically they asked that question at the end. He's like, well, what do you think? Did this just lead to better rote memorization? He's like, no. This retrieval practice has led to building deep foundational knowledge that students can then take and apply and synthesize creatively and in higher order ways. But you need to have the basics, the basic basis of definitions and what concepts mean and what these things mean in order to start using them creatively and apply them creatively. And practice retrieval. A retrieval practice gets you that foundation of understanding and conceptual understanding and memory. Cool. That's that. There you go. Chapter 2 has been completed. Now I think it's going to be mix up your practice in chapter 3. Yep. But just like last time, what I'm going to do first is to begin to answer these questions I've posed throughout this section, and then I'll go ahead and get into ChatGPT to give me a quiz, and then I'll potentially use flashcards, some Anki flashcards. So what is retrieval practice? Retrieval practice is a learning technique in which the learner pulls something out of his own memory. Examples. Practice tests, writing from memory, speaking from memory, flashcards, active recall. So those are just some examples of retrieval practice. Is retrieval practice best for declarative learning or non-declarative as well? Well, They actually answered this right at the end. Retrieval practice is a potent learning technique for anything one needs to remember, one wants to remember. Let's say that. One wants to remember and pull out in the future. Recall in the future. Retrieve in the future. All right, that was the timer. We're going to have a few more questions to answer tomorrow from these. And then we'll go into ChatGPT, and then we'll try to create some flashcards if I feel that's necessary. All right, talk to you guys later. See ya.